Welcome back to Sooner Nation, the online podcast of Heartland Sports. I'm Matt Hofeld, your host, along with our guest this week, Frank Hoffman. He'll be joining us here in just a few minutes to talk about some Louisiana-Monroe Warhawks football. A little bit less salty of an opponent for the Sooners this week as they get ready to face ULM, a team that is 1-0, by the way, but it's also a team that only won 2 games in all of 2015. The Warhawks taking down Southern this last Saturday night, where Oklahoma fell to the University of Houston in Houston. Don't expect a whole lot out of this game. In fact, I would pay per view it with some friends, if you know what I mean. Don't don't waste your $60 or whatever it is to watch this game alone, because you're going to want some company throughout the contest. Oklahoma has the opportunity, in my opinion, to correct the ship that was sent off course in Houston last week, but it's not something that's going to happen this week. The beginning of correcting the mistake happens this week, but the actual correction that takes place a week from now when we're getting ready for Ohio State. As I said in our weekend podcast, recapping the Houston loss, it's not all bad news for Oklahoma. On the immediate front, it's bad because you went on the road. You lost another season opener on the road to a top 15 team. The last time Oklahoma lost on the road and in a season opener was 2009 against BYU to a ranked opponent. Maybe there's a trend there, but if you're going to be the team that everybody wants you to be, then you got to win those type of games. But now you look at how this first half of the season is shaping up for Oklahoma, and you have a program that fell 11 spots down to number 14. It could have been much worse. It could have been much, much worse for Oklahoma. I mean, look at LSU. I mean, they're barely hanging on inside the top 25 now. Now, give them another win over Sisters of the Poor, and people from the SEC will want them back in the top 10. But it could always be worse. And now you're looking at a schedule against Ohio State on September 17th, at TCU on October 1st, and then you got the big thing with Texas and Dallas on October 8th. If Oklahoma wins the next 4 games, they're not only top 10, they're probably close to top 5, and they're right back in the thick of this thing. But it starts Saturday. There are some things that Oklahoma has to correct on Saturday. And Louisiana-Monroe gives Oklahoma that perfect flavor or that perfect blend of a college football opponent that's going to push you around until you push back. I mean, this is a team that ranked in the bottom half. I mean, like 110th at the bottom of the bottom half in rush defense last season, and they gave up over 200 yards on the ground to Southern a week ago. Worst case scenario for Oklahoma on Saturday is you hand off to Samaje, you hand off to Joe, you hand off to Samaje, you hand off to Joe, and the Sooners still win this game 56-14 or whatever. But that's not what Oklahoma needs to do on Saturday. I realize I just destroyed Oklahoma's opponent before we even bring in the guest to talk about him. My bad, Frank. But whatever. I mean, it is what it is. He knows that. Louisiana-Monroe is a team that's building. First-year head coach. They're used to playing. I mean, coming to Norman to play Oklahoma is not going to be anything special to them. It's not like they're going to get googly eyes. This is a team that's played at Alabama last season. I think they played at Arkansas last season. They're coming to Norman, and then a few weeks later, they're going on to Auburn. They get around, but they get around to earn a paycheck. This isn't a winning program. They want to be a winning program, and I think they can be in the Sun Belt. They got to get some talent in there first. And we'll go over game plan here in just a minute as we get ready to talk to Frank. But what I was saying with Oklahoma is you got to correct some mistakes. I mean, defensively, you got to eliminate the penalties. I like the pressure that Obo brought. I love the fact that it lost in all this talk. Lost in the loss, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is the fact that Oklahoma's defense held Greg Ward Jr. to 1 yard rushing. 1 yard for a guy who's kind of a legs first type quarterback. That's impressive. But they got to eliminate the penalties. And they got to figure out the cornerback spot opposite of Jordan Thomas. I think you're probably going to see a healthy rotation on Saturday. I don't know who's going to start. My guess is Cobb is going to start. But I'm not going to be surprised to see Dakota Austin in there. And really what's better for Oklahoma, in my opinion, is that Dakota Austin figures this out. And he wasn't terrible. He was just outmatched. And there's nobody on this Louisiana-Monroe roster that's going to outmatch Dakota Austin. There may be someone on Ohio State the next week. That's why he's going to get some things figured out. But he's the best case scenario for Oklahoma at that corner position. And the reason is simple. Do you want to start a freshman against Ohio State? Well, I know he's got talent. I know he's going to be good. But he's a freshman. This time last year he was starting his senior season in high school. Do you want to put him out there against Ohio State? It's better for Oklahoma if Dakota Austin gets it figured out. But if Dakota Austin can't get it figured out, then absolutely expect Parrish Cobb to get in there. But those are the two things the defense has to do. And they're fixable things. That's what we said on Sunday. Everything's fixable for Oklahoma. They didn't just flat out get beat because they're incapable. They got beat because they made mistakes. And when you play a team as good as Houston is, you can't make mistakes. Turn the ball over on offense. You got Austin Siebert messing up on the field goal. Those are things you got to fix. And speaking of offense, Baker Mayfield's got to get it figured out. Lincoln Riley's got to get it figured out. You can't, you still, I know what you're saying about being behind the chains, but you have a home run threat in Joe Mixon. You have a punishing running back in Samaje Perine. There's no way those guys should have been limited to 12 combined carries. You got to get that figured out. Baker Mayfield has to start looking at all of his options and not just trying to hit Mark Andrews down the seam. Mark Andrews down the seam is nice. It was fun to watch on Saturday, but it won't work every time, particularly when you're not looking at your underneath routes. That safety is going to stay planted deep. And we saw that happen in the second half. There's lots of things for Oklahoma to work on Saturday. And what Louisiana-Monroe provides for the Sooners is the opportunity to work on those things, even the opportunity to make some mistakes. Now, the best case thing that you want to see is mistakes-free football. But even if they do make mistakes, the Sooners have the opportunity to make those mistakes and not lose anything. Louisiana-Monroe is not going to come in and win this game unless everyone gets hurt for Oklahoma. But you got to start getting ready for Ohio State. And getting ready for Ohio State means tweaking some small things, and putting an opponent out there allows you to tweak. And that's what Oklahoma needs to do. Our guest today is play-by-play voice of I can't even talk. The play-by-play voice of the Louisiana-Monroe Warhawks. Let's bring in Frank Hoffmann. Frank, how you doing, man?
I'm great, man. How are you doing? Better not deserve, actually.
Well, yeah. I mean, you guys had a great weekend over the weekend. A huge opening win for you guys. I want to look at honestly, I'm going to admit here,
all I did was score peek. But Garrett Smith, I mean, come on, 150 rushing yards, 208 passing yards, one of 7 returning starters on this offense. He's that guy, the trigger man, obviously, but is he kind of the main crank in the wheel that makes the offense turn for Warhawks?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say about Garrett. He, of course, started most of the season last year as a freshman. He got hurt late in the year. He would have started the whole year. I think it was the end of 8 games he started, and had a good year, passed over 2,000 yards in those 8 games. And he's kind of the guy the offense is centered around. And yeah, he did have a great start against Southern. We were very pleased.
Well, when you look at the offense, there was obviously potential there for them to expand on what they did last year. 21 points per game was the average. I think it ranked them around 111th in the nation. Off to a great start. But who does Garrett Smith have to work with? Talk about some of his complementary weapons. He had another running back rush for over 100 yards. Who are the receivers he was throwing to? What can you tell us about how this offense is clicking?
Yeah. When you evaluate ULM, of course, when you compare to last year was one of the worst years we've had in our history. Went 2-11. It was just a tough year, and we really feel like there's more talent on this team than actually showed up in the games last year. Just some reason didn't work. There's a brand new head coach now, Matt Viator. We're very excited about Coach Viator being with us, and so we're very optimistic. You go from 2-11, you may not turn it around to 11-2, but you hope there's going to be improvement, and we feel pretty confident about improving. Now, that doesn't mean we come to Oklahoma and beat the Sooners, but we are proud to have this game. I have to admit that.
Well, 38 points on offense. You gave up 21 on defense. Again, we're talking about areas of improvement. And when you look at last season to this season, new coach, new schemes, new attitude, which one of those 2 units do you feel like has to make the biggest leap from 2015 to 2016, the offense or the defense?
Well, that's a good question. Offensively, we should be stronger. Up in our offensive line, we've got a good bit of experienced guys returning. Wide receivers, a bevy of good wide receivers, probably led by a Jalen Holly, who has been a solid now. He's a senior and a solid player for the last 4 years. And we've got some other good receivers as well. So, I think offensively, I would give the mark there. On defense, we lost a lot of players. But we got a lot of new faces coming in, and again, it's really, this is a hard team to compare to last year because last year is not something we were very proud of. So I really think we'll be a lot better on defense this year. We just got to see how that plays out as we go into each game. There's not many guys that were playing a whole lot last year, but they had a good start, with the win over Southern on Saturday night, and so that remains to be seen. And obviously, it'll be a big challenge when we go up against Baker Mayfield and you guys on Saturday night.
Well, Baker Mayfield had his fair share of problems Saturday in Houston. He kind of admitted or took blame yesterday in the media days for trying to do too much, trying to force too much downfield. It looked like he got right a little bit when his first read wasn't there, or he was ignoring his first read and going downfield. How do you see the Warhawks lining up to try to defend what's really a 2-headed monster between the running back group, Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon, and what Baker Mayfield's able to produce with his receivers?
Right.
Is it a stop the run and then
Saturday night game? And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, in your opinion, is it a stop the run and make him pass, or is it try to stop the pass and force the run?
That's a coach's decision. I hope they can make the right decision. I tell you what, we had a Saturday night game, and you guys played relatively early, so I was able to watch the whole game, and we were all very surprised. And we realized Houston has a good football team, and they were ranked before beating you guys, ranked number 15 in the country.
Right.
But of course, we're watching that, thinking, "Oh man, these guys are gonna be mad next week when we travel to Oklahoma." So yeah, that's going through your mind. But we have tremendous respect for what goes on in Oklahoma. We played there a couple of years ago and, got beat pretty solidly, but a good trip and a program and a team that we have great respect for. And, and frankly, we don't play at the same level as Oklahoma. We're in the football bowl subdivision, but we're kind of in the, we're in the mid-level. And frankly, this is a money game for ULM. Mm-hmm. But, you still hope to win those games. We upset number 8 Arkansas in 2012, first game of the year. They were ranked number 8 at the time. We beat Alabama in Coach Saban's very first year there back in '07. That was a fun trip, too. So, it's not totally impossible. You're always hopeful anytime you tee that thing up.
That's something that I think a lot of people don't really take into consideration when you talk about games like this. I mean, Louisiana-Monroe is used to traveling. You've talked about Arkansas. You talked about Alabama. You guys played at Alabama week 3 last year. So coming into Norman, Oklahoma, and playing in this stadium, that's not going to be something that's going to rattle these guys. But it's a part of the experience for those guys. It's part of the experience for Oklahoma is they've got hurdles that they've got to overcome. But when you talk about the game itself, I mean, the whistle's going to blow. These guys are going to line up. Who are some of the standout guys, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, that Oklahoma fans may go, wow, where'd that kid come from?
Well, we were very excited about the game that David Griffin had it for us at linebacker in the game last week. Now he's a sophomore. He played a good bit last year. Was not a starter, but he did have, I think, 37 tackles in the year as a backup linebacker, and he had a great game, so, he kind of helped anchors us there. We do have 2 defensive backs that are returning starters from last year, Justin Backus and Trey Hunter. We feel good about them. As I said a moment ago, the defense is just really hard to evaluate. We really think there's some pretty good talent here. They just haven't had a lot of experience to have proven it, and, they get a chance to kind of check that out a little bit against the Sooners.
Yeah, and then is it 2 weeks later you guys travel to Auburn after Oklahoma? Is that right?
We actually start our conference play next week against Georgia Southern, which is an outstanding program there too in our conference. And then we're off a week, and then actually the game at Auburn is not until October 1st.
Okay.
It's the 4th game of the year. I think y'all's schedule was similar, if I'm not mistaken. You had an open date the same weekend we did.
Yeah, we play Louisiana-Monroe, and then the following week it's Ohio State. Yeah, I mean both of our teams lined up a bunch of cupcakes to start the season, right?
Yeah, in fact, I really think you need to remind your players and coaches that you guys need to get ready for Ohio State, right? Don't worry about ULM.
Yeah, that's what I say anytime I'm worrying about Garrett Smith. Let's focus on the Buckeyes. Hey, one other player I want to ask you about on the offensive side of the ball is Ben Luckett. It's a guy that I really didn't know a lot about until Saturday. 18 carries, 110 yards. He scored a touchdown, averaged 6.1 yards per carry. What kind of player is he?
Well, he's a good football player. He's out of Texas, and he's a 215-pounder. He last year, as a freshman, he ran for over 500 yards. Again, on an offense that didn't produce a whole lot last year, he led us in rushing last year. He was not scheduled to actually start the game last week. Tyler King was a medical redshirt. Tyler ended up not able to play, and then got the call. And you just read the stats. He had a great game. So we feel like we can mix the pass with the run. We've got to do both. Garrett Smith has got to have a good game if we have any kind of chance at all. But we're excited about Ben Luckett, no doubt about that.
So Tyler Kane, is he healthy? Is he looking at going this week, or do you know any information on that?
Yeah, I really don't. I don't know the situation right now. I wish I had an update on that, but I just don't have anything to tell you. He had redshirted last year. He's actually had a 6-year medical redshirt situation. He's from a high school program that's outstanding in our area at West Monroe, which happens to be my hometown. And we hope Tyler's able to get back in there soon.
You're listening to Sooner Nation, the online podcast of Heartland Sports. Frank Hoffmann, the play-by-play voice for the Louisiana-Monroe Warhawks, our guest right now. Frank, one more question for you, and it's kind of to close it out. You mentioned first-year head coach. You mentioned last year, one of the worst years that you guys have experienced. What do you see as the biggest difference maybe in work ethic or attitude or mindset from last year to this year under a new coaching staff?
It seems like that's all there. Matt Viator, our new coach, actually coached at the McNeese State down in Lake Charles, Louisiana, same state. McNeese is in the football championship subdivision, it used to be 1AA. He was the head coach there for 10 years, never had a losing season, had 3 10-win seasons, went undefeated in the regular season last year before losing in the second round of the playoffs. So he's the guy who we were very excited to get, and he brought in a whole new staff too, coaches, some that have some background with us and some that don't. So We're very excited about Coach Viator and very excited about the whole staff. So we think it's if things are looking on the upward move, again to go and play Oklahoma, it's always a big challenge for a team like ULM. But we still are glad to have the game. We're excited to come there and do the game, and we think the future will be very good for the Warhawks.
Frank Hoffmann, he'll be calling the action for the Warhawks on Saturday night in Norman. Frank, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate you calling in and checking in with us, and have safe travel to Norman. We'll look forward to seeing you Saturday night.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much.
All right, take care, buddy.
Well, that was it. You heard it straight from I started to say the horse's mouth. Maybe I should just say the Warhawks' mouth. But, I mean, look, they're coming to collect a paycheck. And that's what this game's about. For Oklahoma, and everybody does this, Oklahoma's buying a win. Big thanks to Frank Hoffman for jumping in there and talking with us, though. Oklahoma's buying a win on Saturday. So what are you going to do with that win? You don't just want to go out there and waste it. Oklahoma needs to pass the ball. They don't need to pass the ball. They won't need to do really anything special. But they need to pass the ball to improve for Ohio State. It's what I was saying before Frank joined us. Defensively, they need to. I mean, I think they could live in Louisiana-Monroe's backfield. Look at the type of pressure they brought against Houston. And you're telling me it won't be better against Louisiana-Monroe? I mean, if they can get that kind of pressure against Houston, they're going to get that kind of pressure against the Warhawks. But you don't want to bring it every play. You got to get those defensive backs, those cornerbacks have to be tested. So you got to give them opportunity to get tested. And this is the perfect opportunity to do that. Game plan is simple for the offense. In between running the Samaj P. Ryan and in between running with Joe Mixon, Baker Mayfield's got to look at his underneath routes. You want to see Baker Mayfield go through his progressions, and he should have plenty of time to do that. You want to see Baker Mayfield hit the deep ball, but you want to see Baker Mayfield hit the underneath route as well. And I promise you, they're going to be calling plays where underneath routes are available. And Baker Mayfield will be graded on what he does with his eyes just as much as what he does with his arm. That's what you got to do in offense. It's easy. Defense, you keep cranking up the pressure, but you let those defensive backs get tested, and you hope that they grade out. They should grade out exceptional. They should grade out exceptional. If they don't, then we really need to be worried about Ohio State. If Louisiana-Monroe is able to get downfield in Oklahoma, and they're going to try. I mean, they had a quarterback that ran for 150 last week. You had a running back that ran for 110. Then you had another running back that ran for 57. They're going to try to get downfield in Oklahoma. The key is going to be Oklahoma not allowing them to do that. Because what the Warhawks are going to do, and this is, I mean, it's a poor man's version, but what they're going to try to do is exactly what Ohio State's going to try to do. They're going to try to overpower Oklahoma at the point of attack. They're going to try to put in more blockers than the Sooners have bodies, and they're going to try to just cram the ball down Oklahoma's throat. Louisiana-Monroe doesn't want that clock to stop. And so they're going to try 4 yards in a cloud of dust, and then every now and then they're going to pop a pass. And that's exactly what Ohio State's going to do. So it helps Oklahoma from that aspect. But you can't let ULM have any success at all. I'll give you a score prediction here in just a second on that. I got to say I was wrong about a couple things before we go into the Big 12 rundown. The first thing I got to say I was wrong about was the perception of the Big 12. I said the Big 12 would start last weekend with a bloody nose and then get a black eye on Sunday night with Kansas State on Friday and then Texas on Sunday. Kansas State, man, they lost, but they looked decent in losing. I think they played Stanford closer than I expected them to, and I'm pretty sure I wasn't alone in that. And the fact that Texas beat Notre Dame, I expected the Longhorns to get beaten down. Now, I'm not ready yet to jump on that bandwagon that Texas is back, meaning vintage 2005 or 2009 Texas football. I'm not ready to go there yet. But it was a good win, and I was absolutely wrong on what I thought, especially this Bouchel kid. I thought Texas had no chance running out of freshmen at quarterback. But I was wrong. I don't mind admitting that. Oklahoma fans don't like to say this. I'm one of them. But the Big 12 needs a strong Texas. Oklahoma, it's been a one pony league for a while. And if you get Oklahoma strong and Texas strong, it makes the Big 12 represent itself very, very well. So I hope Texas is back. Bob Stoops has never bowed down to Texas. Bob Stoops has no reason to fear Texas. Yeah, he's lost some, but he's won more than... Hey, Bob Stoops has taken a lot more than he's lost from Texas. And beating a good Texas team has been a lot more beneficial for the Sooners than beating a mediocre or bad Texas team. Oklahoma needs, Big 12 needs a strong Texas team. Yeah, pun intended there with Charlie Strong. But I mean, that's good. I got to admit, I was wrong. Let's talk real fast about Big 12 football this weekend. Things get underway Saturday morning. A little bit of a step up in competition for Oklahoma State as they get ready to play Central Michigan. Cowboys are 20 and a half point favorites in this game. The Oklahoma State has to win. What I really want to see is the next opponent. I want to see Pitt. But keep in mind that this Central Michigan game was tight last year for Oklahoma State. Sorry, Sooner fans. The Central Michigan game was tight last year for Oklahoma State on the road in the season opener. I don't know that it's going to be tight this week. West Virginia, who had one of the top games last week with the win over Missouri, they go into the garbage game this week. Youngstown State comes calling for the Mountaineers. We're not even going to talk about that. Ohio at Kansas. Check this out, guys. The Kansas Jayhawks are 2.5 point favorites. When is the last time? I'm really curious about this. I don't honestly. I won't care enough to go look it up. But when's the last time you can remember Kansas back-to-back weeks being a favorite? Jayhawks 2.5 point favorites over Kansas. Wait a minute, that didn't make sense. Jayhawks 2.5 point favorites over Ohio. Ohio comes in 0-1. Could the Jayhawks start their season 2-0? I want them to. I want to jump in there. But what I see is even in loss last week, Greg Windham from Ohio threw for 393 yards and 4 touchdowns. 393 yards and 4 touchdowns is coming your way, Kansas, and you're in a 2.5 point favorite. I think old Kansas rears its head again. I got to go with the Bobcats. I'm sorry, Kansas. You got to prove it to me. And last week's win wasn't enough to do that. SMU at Baylor. Bears 31.5 point favorites over the Mustangs. I think Seth Russell and company are able to do this. Scrimmage last week in a garbage game for Baylor, but Russell was 14 of 20, 163 yards, 4 touchdowns. 163 yards and 4 touchdowns. 14 completions and 4 touchdowns. I'm not for sure how much Seth Russell played in that game last week, but I'd be surprised if it was more than a half. Baylor rolls SMU. Sorry, Mustangs, but no one cares about you. Anyway, Arkansas at TCU. Now, TCU, number 15, if you're looking at the coaches poll, TCU is the highest ranked team in the Big 12. After surviving the South Dakota State Jackrabbits, now Arkansas comes to town. Kenny Hill looked good, 439-yard passing. But I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm sold on TCU all of a sudden. I really thought coming into the season that the Big 12 would come down between Oklahoma and TCU. Oklahoma lost. TCU struggled. This game, I mean, this game's a toss-up to me, really. But I think TCU wins it. I think TCU rebounds this week. I think they're back to focused. At least I hope they are. UTEP at Texas. Longhorns 29-point favorites. I mean, you got to win, right? I mean, you got to win. You got to win by more than 29. You got to cover that spread after beating Notre Dame. You got to follow that up. Iowa State at Iowa. 0-2 is looking your way, Cyclone fans. Nothing you can do about it. Hawkeyes are 15-point favorites over Iowa State. I would expect them to cover. Texas Tech at Arizona State to end the night. It's a 9 o'clock kickoff Central Time for Texas Tech at Arizona State. Sun Devils are 2.5-point favorites, and Texas Tech rolled last week. Patty Mahomes, 483 yards, 4 touchdowns. But it wasn't against Arizona State, and it wasn't on the road. It gets real for Texas. I am not sold on Texas Tech. And I was wrong about Kansas State. I was wrong about Texas. I'm not willing to say I'm wrong about Texas Tech after they played a nobody garbage game last week. I think it gets real for Cliff Kingsbury. Remember, this guy, in my opinion, this guy has to be over 500 at the end of 2016 to keep Lincoln Riley from taking his job. And I think 500 is looking right there at you. It's knocking at the door. Give me Arizona State over Texas Tech. Now Oklahoma, Louisiana-Monroe. This game is not in jeopardy. 46-point favorites for the Sooners. No way I would touch that. But I do think 45 to 49 is probably where Oklahoma is going to score point-wise. I think they're going to call off the dogs in the second half and go with a lot of garbage time running. Daniel Brooks is going to get a good look in this game. I think you're going to see Austin Kendall in this game. You're going to see a plethora of receivers in this game. But there's no way I'm touching a 46-point spread for Oklahoma. I like this game to be somewhere around 45 to 14 for the Sooners. And we'll be back Sunday night to talk about it. Thanks for listening, everyone, to the Sooner Nation podcast. Hit us up on Twitter at Sports Heartland. Make sure you follow us on the website as well. Again, thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your football. Boomer Sooner, everybody.
When I wake up, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. And when I go out, well, I know I'm gonna be